Hey, welcome! You ever stop and wonder why we have things like governments or laws or even taxes? I mean, where did all this stuff come from? Well, political philosophy. And I know, it sounds like something from a dusty old textbook. It's really just humanity's ongoing, centuries-long attempt to answer one single, absolutely vital question. A question that affects every single one of us every single day. So, what is it? This. This is the question. That's it. How should we, as millions, even billions of strangers, organize ourselves to live in one big society? You know, everything that follows, every law, every election, every single political debate you see on the news is just another attempt to answer this one question. It's kind of like the ultimate group project, right? So, to even begin to answer that massive question, we first need to understand the materials we're working with. Before you can build anything, you need to know what your building blocks are. And it turns out, every political system, no matter how different they seem on the surface, is built from the same set of core concepts. Let's break down the three most important ones. First up, we've got justice. At its heart, this is all about fairness. Simple, right? But what does fair actually mean? Should everyone get the exact same piece of the pie? Or should the people who work the hardest get a bigger slice? How do we deal with people who break the rules? The way a society answers this, well, it shapes pretty much everything else. Okay, next up is liberty, freedom. This one seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? The freedom to do what you want. But this is where things get really, really interesting. Because it turns out liberty isn't just one simple idea. It's actually two. And this is a huge fork in the road. On one side, you have negative liberty. That's freedom from things, freedom from interference. Think of it like a shield. The government's only job is to put up a shield to stop other people from hurting you or taking your stuff. But on the other side, you have positive liberty. This is the freedom to do something, to actually achieve your potential. Think of it like a ladder. Here, the government's job is to provide that ladder, things like education and healthcare, so you have a real chance to climb. Which one of these you lean towards totally changes what you think a government should even be doing. And finally, there's equality. Now, should everyone be equal before the law? I think most of us would say, yeah, absolutely. But what about having equal stuff or achieving equal outcomes in life? All of a sudden, this idea of equality starts to bump up against liberty. For example, should we tax the wealthy at a higher rate to pay for public services? Well, that's a classic clash between liberty, the freedom to keep what you earn, and equality, the goal of creating a more level playing field. So, you see, the big question is, how do we balance these incredibly powerful and often competing ideas? And that brings us to the main event. Let's think of those core concepts, justice, liberty, and equality, as our fundamental building blocks. The great political ideologies are really just different blueprints, different instruction manuals for how to assemble those blocks into a society that actually works. We're going to look at four of the most influential blueprints out there. So here's our roadmap for what's coming up. We've got four big ideologies. Each one picks a different core value as its absolute priority. And because of that, each one has a totally different idea about what the government should do. As you can see, right off the bat, each one involves a major trade-off. Now let's dive in and explore each of these blueprints a little closer. First step, let's look at the blueprint for liberalism. In this model of society, the most important piece of the whole puzzle, the absolute center of the universe, is the individual, you. This idea, which was pushed forward by thinkers like John Locke, was absolutely revolutionary at the time. It basically argues that your rights don't come from a king or a church or a government. Nope, you are simply born with them. And so the government's number one job is just to protect the freedom you already have. So, what does a society built on this blueprint actually look like? Well, it's all about personal freedom. The right to speak your mind, to practice your own religion, to live your life however you see fit. It champions democracy, the rule of law, to make sure nobody, not even the government, is above it. And it tends to support free markets so individuals can go out and chase their own economic dreams. Okay, now for our second blueprint, conservatism. This approach builds a very different kind of society. Instead of starting with these big, abstract ideas about the individual, it looks to something else, the hard-won wisdom of experience. It argues that the things that have worked for generations are probably our best bet. Thinkers like Edmund Burke were really skeptical of big, radical revolutions. They saw society not as a machine that you can just take apart and redesign, but more like a complex living thing, like an ancient tree. If you try to just tear it down and rebuild it from scratch, you're taking a massive risk. You might end up destroying a lot more than you create. So the conservative blueprint is all about preserving the institutions that give us stability. Things like the family, religion, the nation. It's not that change is bad, but it should be slow, it should be gradual, it should be organic. It's not careful gardening, not taking a wrecking ball to the whole thing. Our third blueprint, socialism, shifts the focus in a huge way. It looks at the individual-focused approach of liberalism and says, hey, that system creates massive, massive inequality. For socialists, the main character of the story isn't the individual, it's the community, the collective. This is a really powerful idea, famously put forward by Karl Marx. It sees capitalism not as a system of freedom, but as a system of exploitation. The argument is that any system based on the private ownership of big resources, factories, land, technology, will always benefit a small group of people at the expense of everyone else. And because of that, a fundamental change is needed. So, the socialist blueprint calls for collective ownership of the really important resources. The goal is to manage the economy not for private profit, but for the public good. It's about ensuring everyone has access to the basics and trying to overcome the huge gaps between the rich and poor that are created by private wealth. And that brings us to our final and definitely most radical blueprint: anarchism. Anarchists look at all these other systems, liberal, conservative, socialists, and they see one common problem running through all of them: a centralized, powerful state. And their solution is pretty straightforward: get rid of it entirely. This quote gets right to the absolute heart of the anarchist argument. Thinkers like Proudhon believed that the very existence of a state, which is just one group of people having the power to force another group of people to do things, makes true liberty and true equality impossible. From this point of view, the state itself is a problem. So if you get rid of the government, what's left? Just chaos? Well, not according to anarchists. The alternative is a society built entirely on voluntary cooperation. People would organize themselves from the bottom up through free associations and mutual agreements without anyone having the authority to rule over anyone else. You could say it's the ultimate expression of both liberty and equality, taken to their absolute limit. Okay, so we've just explored 4 very, very different blueprints for how to build a society. But it is so important to remember that these aren't just abstract theories from a philosophy class. These ideas have a direct and really powerful impact on your life, every single day. Let me show you how this actually works, step by step. You start with an idea, like negative liberty, that freedom from interference we talked about. That idea doesn't just stay in a book. It becomes a political party's platform. Maybe they campaign on less government regulation. Then that platform gets turned into actual public policy, like laws that lower taxes or reduce business oversight. And finally, those laws directly affect your daily life: the price of your groceries, the kinds of jobs available in your town, the social safety net that's there for you if you need it. You see, these blueprints are being built all around us, all the time. So that brings us right back to where we started. We've got 4 blueprints, and each one has its own unique vision for justice, liberty, and equality. None of them are perfect. They all require some kind of trade-off. So the real question is, which values matter most to you? If you were handed the plans, what kind of society would you choose to build? Now that's a question worth thinking about.